Leaving behind the mists of prehistoric North America, we cross vast oceans and leap back through time into a radically different world, one that did not quietly fade into history. This was a civilization that once stood tall among the titans of the ancient age, commanding fortified capitals, drafting international treaties, and clashing swords with mighty Egypt. And yet, for centuries, it vanished from memory, its language silenced, its name erased. Only buried stones beneath the Anatolian soil whispered its presence. This is the rediscovered saga of the Hittites, traveling back over 3,500 years into the late Bronze Age. We arrive in the heartland of what is now central Turkey. Here, across the rugged Anatolian plateau, where steep valleys divide the hills and icy winters follow parched, dry summers, an empire once rose from the soil. Though the terrain is unforgiving, this was the birthplace of a kingdom. At its zenith, the Hittite Empire stood shoulder to shoulder with Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon. Their domains stretched wide, from the Aegean coast to the frontiers of Mesopotamia, and down into today's Syria and Lebanon. Their capital, Hattusa, nestled near a river bend and enclosed by towering cliffs and walls, once pulsed with life and power. Now, it lies quiet, grass-covered ruins scattered with monumental gateways and lions carved from stone. But long ago, it was the political and spiritual heart of a realm that shaped ancient history. The Hittites spoke an early Indo-European tongue, now decoded and recognized as one of the oldest written forms of that language family. They adopted cuneiform from their Mesopotamian neighbors, but also developed a unique system, Luwian hieroglyphs, etched in looping symbols onto stone. Archaeologists in the early 1900s unearthed their archives, thousands of clay tablets filled with diplomatic records, laws, omens, hymns, and royal letters. Before these discoveries, the Hittites were barely more than shadows in ancient texts, briefly referenced in Egyptian documents and the Hebrew Bible. Many historians even doubted they were real. But with each shovel of earth at Hattusa and neighboring sites, the pieces of a long-lost empire came to light. A story buried for 3 millennia began to speak again. Today, among the ruins of Hattusa, the outline of the once great city still endures. Thick stone foundations form the skeletons of what were once towering defensive walls stretching over 6 kilometers. Lion-guarded gates and pathways once lined with sacred buildings still invite the curious traveler. You can see the remnants of granaries, garrisons, and temples, softened by nature but unmistakably present. Unlike the grid-like precision of Egyptian settlements, Hattusa was molded to its landscape. It wasn't imposed upon the earth, it rose with it, twisting around rocky outcrops and settling into natural defenses. It was a fortress and a holy city, shaped for security and reverence alike. Just outside the capital lies Yatsulakhaya, a rock-cut sanctuary nestled into a limestone ridge. Within its sacred chambers, processions of deities are carved in relief, frozen in ritual motion across the walls, silent guardians of a long-forgotten faith. The Hittites believed in a sprawling and ever-changing pantheon. Their spiritual world was deeply syncretic, absorbing gods from foreign lands and reinterpreting them. They called their homeland the Land of 1,000 Gods, a realm where stormlords, solar queens, earth spirits, and ancestral protectors all had roles to play. Their rituals were elaborate and frequent, often linked to seasons, agriculture, and divine favor. One well-known myth tells of the storm god's battle against the serpent Iluyanka, a tale that mirrors the legends of Mesopotamia, the Levant, and even early Greece. These similarities reveal how ancient civilizations, though isolated by today's standards, shared ideas across distance. But the Hittites were not just warriors or mystics, they were skilled diplomats. In fact, they hold the honor of crafting the oldest known peace treaty in world history. After the bloody confrontation at Kadesh in 1274 BCE, Pharaoh Ramses II and the Hittite ruler Hattusili III formalized peace. Their agreement, carved into stone and etched onto clay, survives today. A replica even hangs in the United Nations, a global reminder of diplomacy's ancient roots. Innovation wasn't limited to politics. The Hittites revolutionized warfare with their advanced chariot design, lighter, faster, and crewed by 3 men for balance and efficiency. Their armies were well coordinated, capable of long campaigns, supported by supply depots, granaries, and fortified roads. Their strategic mind extended beyond the battlefield. They knew how to govern and sustain an empire. Yet, as with many ancient giants, their time would end. Around 1200 BCE, the Hittite Empire crumbled. They became part of the broader Bronze Age collapse, a sweeping and mysterious unraveling that disrupted multiple civilizations in the Eastern Mediterranean. Whether it was driven by invasions, famine, climate shifts, internal strife, or a deadly mix of all remains unclear. But their cities fell silent, their archives buried, and their language forgotten. Still, their true legacy lies not in how they disappeared, but in what they left behind. Hattusa today does not feel deserted. Its walls, though aged, still stand. Its streets, though quiet, still follow ancient roots. And the tablets dug from storerooms and libraries still speak across the ages. Their formal language, recording royal promises, sacred ceremonies, seasonal festivals, and laws. They speak of life, agriculture, alliances, worship, and warfare. They remind us that history isn't always preserved in marble or gold. Sometimes it waits in clay, in broken stone, in symbols nearly erased by time. Unlike the enigmatic Clovis people or the vanishing Mocha, the Hittites didn't simply vanish, they were rediscovered. For centuries, their name floated in myth. Now, it is spoken with certainty. Yet, even with their cities mapped and their words deciphered, much of their world remains unreachable. We can read their treaties, but not their inner doubts. We can identify their gods, but not always their prayers. We can walk the foundations of their homes, but we don't know what it meant to live beneath those Anatolian skies, feeling the weight of empire at your feet. Perhaps that's what draws us to their story. It's more than a tale of might or collapse. It's a reflection on how entire worlds can vanish beneath dust, and how delicate memory truly is. For millennia, the Hittites were silent. Now, slowly, they are being heard again, and as we continue unearthing ancient stories from forgotten lands, their presence remains grounded, steady, and carved into the very stone of time. Long ago, the ancient Pueblo people, sometimes called by the older name Anasazi, developed one of the most remarkable and self-reliant societies in prehistoric North America. Hidden in lofty desert cliffs, scattered across windswept mesas, and nestled in meandering valleys, now mostly still, lie the remnants of a vibrant civilization that once flourished in places few would dare to inhabit today. Though often still known by the antiquated term Anasazi, these people, the ancient Puebloans, established their homes in the Four Corners region, where present-day Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico converge. The land is full of dramatic contrasts: searing sunlight and bitter nighttime cold, soaring sandstone towers and secluded waterways, arid air and sudden summer storms. For many centuries, this challenging terrain supported an extensive network of villages, communal centers, and sacred spaces. Though the people have long since departed, what remains continues to communicate across time. Their story begins softly, around 2000 BCE, as small groups began settling in the high desert, transitioning gradually from a nomadic life of hunting and gathering toward more rooted and permanent settlements. Over many generations, they mastered the art of desert agriculture, constructing irrigation channels, utilizing floodplain methods, and timing their planting with care to draw corn, beans, and squash from the unyielding earth. Their earliest homes were shallow, semi-subterranean pit dwellings carved into the ground, but as the centuries passed, their architecture evolved. By approximately 750 CE, the ancient Puebloans were constructing above-ground homes, clusters of sandstone and adobe rooms with thick insulating walls that retained heat through frigid nights and kept interiors cool through long, sweltering days. Some structures were modest, while others reached several stories high, comprising hundreds of rooms stacked like honeycombs into cliff sides, blending seamlessly into the canyon walls. Chaco Canyon, in what is today northwestern New Mexico, emerged as a major cultural and ceremonial hub. From roughly 900 to 1150 CE, it was the setting for extraordinary building efforts. Grand structures such as Pueblo, Bonito, and Chetroquetl were designed with careful alignment to solar and lunar cycles, linked by meticulously straight roads stretching across the desert. These were more than simple habitations. They were epicenters of commerce, religion, skywatching, and strategy. Builders transported tens of thousands of wooden beams from remote mountain ranges, carrying them across great distances without the use of draft animals or wheeled transport. The engineering precision at Chaco is awe-inspiring. Structures are oriented to celestial events like solstices and equinoxes. Their massive walls exhibit decorative layering, sophisticated stonework, and tightly interlocked blocks, a quiet yet undeniable genius. Findings such as traces of cacao originating in Mesoamerica, turquoise workshops, finely crafted ceramics, and tropical bird remains reveal connections to faraway peoples and places. Clearly, the ancient Puebloans were part of a much broader cultural world than their isolated desert home might suggest. Yet architecture was only part of who they were. Cultural and spiritual life centered on kivas, circular, semi-subterranean chambers used for rituals, storytelling, and governance. These spaces lay at the heart of many communities, accessed by wooden ladders descending into the earth, a symbolic return to ancestral origins. Fires once burned at their centers, with smoke exiting through vents positioned with care. Within these stone-walled sanctuaries, songs and stories echoed. These rooms were more than functional. They were revered. Life followed a sacred cycle, planting and harvesting seasons, gatherings, and celestial observances. Villages spread across mesas and canyons were connected by systems of trade, kinship, and shared beliefs. They innovated to survive, constructing check dams and terraced fields to manage water, planting crops at different elevations to reduce drought risk. Eventually, however, the people began to leave. By the late 1200s, many of the cliff homes and mesa-top settlements had been vacated. The reasons remained debated. Prolonged droughts, resource pressures, shifting societies, or conflict may all have played a part. Some locations appear to have been quickly deserted. Others seem to have been abandoned gradually. But this wasn't a disappearance. It was a migration, not an end. The descendants of the ancient Puebloans endure today among the Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo communities of Arizona and New Mexico. These modern peoples maintain both spiritual and cultural ties to the ancient sites. When you walk among the ruins at Mesa Verde, Bandelier, or Canyon de Chelly, you can feel that connection. The silence isn't emptiness, it's remembrance. Colorado's Mesa Verde is among the most iconic of these ancestral places. Steep sandstone cliffs plunge into shaded alcoves, where entire villages were once constructed beneath natural overhangs, sheltered from wind and sun, hidden in plain sight. Cliff Palace, the most renowned of these communities, boasts over 150 rooms and 20 kivas, sweeping in a graceful arc along the canyon wall. Its sheer size humbles, yet its spaces feel intimate. Smoke-blackened ceilings and narrow doorways still remain. Standing there, you can almost hear the voices that once echoed through those stone halls. The movement of daily life, the warmth of community. The brilliance here is subtle, not ostentatious. It's found in the resourcefulness of people who worked with what the land gave them. They shaped tools from bone, stone, and wood, cultivated food in high arid places, stored water in natural cisterns. They lived with the land, not against it. Even their movement through space was deliberate. Handholds and footholds, chiseled into sheer rock faces, hint at a people who scaled cliffs with practiced ease. From these ruins come artifacts that speak of a rich material life. Painted pottery in bold, black, white, and red patterns. Textiles, jewelry made of shell and turquoise, sealed stores of maize, tools worn smooth by years of use. These were not isolated people. They were engineers, craftspeople, artists, farmers, skywatchers, and keepers of stories. Yet so much remains unknown. With no written language, their history must be reconstructed from what remains from ruins, oral histories, and the desert landscape itself. What's perhaps most haunting about the ancient Puebloans is how immediate their world still feels. Unlike other lost civilizations buried beneath jungle or modern cities, many of their homes and ceremonial chambers remain open to the sky. You can walk their footpaths, touch their stones, sit where their fires once burned. Though their voices are gone, something lingers, an almost sacred stillness. The mystery isn't only about why they left, it's about how so much of their life endures without written words, how they adapted, thrived, and eventually moved on, leaving behind shapes and spaces that feel deeply human. As we begin exploring vanished civilizations, the story of the ancient Puebloans reminds us that not all mysteries come from catastrophe or forgotten empires. Sometimes, the quietest absences say the most. A weather-worn footprint on stone, a path leading deep into a canyon with no answer to where it ends. When compared to civilizations like the Maya or the Aztec, the Olmec, sometimes referred to by scholars as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, left behind something altogether more cryptic. No towering temples or elaborate codices remain. Instead, they gifted us something stranger. Enormous carved heads, sunken altars, and symbols that continue to defy full understanding. The core of Olmec Civilization was located along the steamy Gulf Coast of what is now Veracruz and Tabasco in Mexico, a region defined by thick jungles, winding rivers, marshy lowlands, and heavy seasonal rains. It was within these fertile floodplains that the Olmec founded their first communities, starting around 1500 BCE. Even now, their colossal stone heads remain among the most iconic and mystifying artifacts from pre-Columbian America. We don't know who these heads represent. Their meaning remains uncertain, nor do we fully understand how the Olmec managed to carve and transport such massive basalt stones using only primitive tools and no beasts of burden. While the city of San Lorenzo flourished, other ceremonial sites also began to emerge. La Venta, Tres Zapotes, and Laguna de los Cerros, each with its unique architectural design, earthworks, and layout. La Venta, in particular, grew to become a spiritual and cultural nucleus after San Lorenzo's decline around 900 BCE. One of Mesoamerica's oldest known pyramids still stands, surrounded by jade treasures, ritual deposits, and impressive altars carved from stone. Despite the grandeur of their construction, the Olmec left behind very little in terms of readable writing. What remains are carved symbols, glyph-like designs etched into stone or jade, but not enough examples exist in clear enough contexts to decipher a full language system. Artifact, known as the Cascale block, has been suggested as the earliest written text in the Americas. Yet, its interpretation remains elusive, and some experts question whether it's genuine at all. What can be said with more certainty is that the Olmec had a richly layered spiritual system. Many of their sculptures feature human figures merging with animals, especially jaguars. This recurring image, often called the wer-jaguar, combines feline traits with human features. It may symbolize shamanic transformation, ancestral power, or deities associated with rain, fertility, and the underworld. Though we can't be certain of its exact meaning, it's clear that this motif carried profound religious significance. Hints of early Mesoamerican cosmology also appear in Olmec art. Three realms of existence: sky, earth, and underworld, directional symbols, and sacred landscapes such as caves, mountains, and water sources. These themes would echo for centuries in the spiritual systems of later groups like the Maya and Zapotec. Olmec craftsmanship has a distinct and recognizable style. Their artworks, often fashioned from jade, serpentine, and other valuable stones range from miniature masks and figurines to elaborately carved celts. Repeated features include downturned mouths, almond-shaped eyes, and a sense of stylized serenity. These visual elements appear not only in small objects, but also in their grander stone sculptures. Scholars differ in how they interpret this visual language. Some view it as deeply religious or mystical. Others suggest it may reflect social hierarchies or roles within Olmec society. Still, the broader picture of everyday life among the Olmec remains frustratingly out of reach. We don't know the names of their leaders. Their spoken language is lost. We lack detailed records of how their cities looked when fully populated, or how their communities were governed. The world of the Olmec survives only in fragments, individual items pulled from the earth. Lacking full context, by around 400 BCE, the major centers of Olmec society had faded. San Lorenzo had been vacated centuries earlier. Leventa eventually followed, while Tres Zapotes lingered a bit longer, though its culture had already begun to evolve. The exact reasons for this fading remain uncertain. Environmental changes, such as river course shifts or degraded farmland, might have been factors. Internal conflicts or new trade routes could also have played a role. Some scholars think their influence simply merged into the cultures that followed, gradually dissolving rather than abruptly collapsing. Despite their disappearance, the Olmec didn't vanish without leaving an imprint. Their influence echoed through the ages in religious imagery, architectural design, and mythological ideas that shaped later civilizations across Mesoamerica. For instance, the Maya incorporated aspects of Olmec ceremonial architecture and calendar systems. The Aztecs linked parts of their origin stories to the Gulf Coast. Artistic elements like the jaguar motif, the cleft-headed deity, and crossband symbols persisted long after the Olmec were gone. And yet, for all their influence, the true identity of the Olmec remains mostly hidden. Their personal stories are lost. Their cities are largely unexcavated. Their voices are absent. And even as archaeological digs uncover more colossal heads, more jade offerings, and more potent symbols, the central questions remain unanswered. The Nabateans, a Semitic Arab people, thrived between the 4th century BCE and the 1st century CE. Their dominion was rooted in what we know today as Jordan, with their reach extending into portions of modern Syria, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. At the heart of their civilization stood their famed capital, Petra, once known as Rakhmu. Even today, approaching Petra evokes a sense of awe. One must pass through the Sick, a winding canyon where towering stone walls shimmer in hues of crimson, amber, and lavender. The light plays tricks as you walk, then suddenly the canyon opens, revealing Al-Khazna, the treasury, sculpted directly into the cliff face. Its ornate facade looks as if the mountain itself was born with it. The reveal feels theatrical, and perhaps that was intentional. But the Nabateans were more than their breathtaking monuments. They were merchants, hydraulic innovators, and cultural chameleons. Their prosperity didn't arise from military might, but from their mastery of trade. They governed the routes that transported incense, myrrh, spices, silk, and other luxurious goods from the Arabian interior to the Mediterranean. Where others saw barren sand, they saw crossroads. They chiseled passageways through harsh terrain, linking faraway civilizations. Rather than leaving behind elaborate scrolls, they chronicled their world through rock inscriptions, ceramics, and urban ruins. Their language was an early form of Arabic, transcribed using the Aramaic script. Many such writings still survive, carved into cliff faces, temples, and tombs. What truly sets the Nabateans apart was their ingenious control of water. In a region plagued by sparse rainfall and sudden floods, they devised a sophisticated network of aqueducts, dams, cisterns, and water basins to harvest, direct, and store water. These feats of engineering are still visible today. Gutters etched into canyon walls, stone tanks hidden underground, and reservoirs nestled in the cliffs. This mastery over water is what enabled Petra to flourish. not merely as a commercial center, but as a livable oasis in the middle of the desert. Their architecture reflected the same practicality and beauty. Instead of importing material and building upward, they carved directly into the living rock. Tombs, temples, banqueting halls, and staircases were all sculpted from the mountains themselves. The positioning of these monuments was often deliberate, some aligned with astronomical events, others steeped in symbolic meaning. Their facades reveal a blend of influences: Greek columns, Egyptian friezes, Mesopotamian patterns, demonstrating the Nabateans' talent for integrating foreign styles into their own. Petra wasn't merely a city of the dead. It pulsed with life. Remnants of dwellings, marketplaces, gardens, and public institutions point to a thriving urban society. There were theaters, colonnaded avenues, shaded patios, and artisan workshops. By night, torchlight would flicker along the canyon walls, and quiet voices would echo through the stone corridors. Religion played a central, though still largely mysterious role in Nabatean culture. Their chief deity was often symbolized as a cube or a featureless black stone, possibly representing a divine essence beyond human form. Open-air sanctuaries known as high places crowned the cliffs, suggesting that worship was tied to elevation and nature. Female deities like Al-Uza, linked to fertility and guardianship, were also venerated. In time, Greek and Roman religious figures were woven into the Nabatean pantheon, resulting in a unique spiritual fusion that blended old traditions with new interpretations. Unlike other ancient civilizations, the Nabateans did not seek domination through war. Their strength came from diplomacy, infrastructure, and economic savvy. For centuries, they connected the wealth and wisdom of Arabia, the Levant, and the Mediterranean. Their camel caravans moved tirelessly across the sands, pausing at strategic outposts to gather tolls and keep goods flowing. But no kingdom lasts forever. By the 1st century CE, the expanding Roman Empire turned its gaze eastward. Petra stood directly in Rome's path. Though peaceful coexistence lasted for a time, the balance shifted. In 106 CE, under Emperor Trajan, Rome absorbed Nabatea with little resistance, turning it into the province of Arabia. Initially, Nabatean cities continued to prosper under Roman governance. Petra gained new infrastructure, Roman-style roads, public baths, amphitheaters, but over time, Rome prioritized sea routes, weakening the overland trade networks that had sustained Petra's wealth. Earthquakes in the 4th and 6th centuries further damaged the city. Gradually, Petra faded from relevance, and by the time Crusaders arrived in the region centuries later, it was a hollowed relic, a myth passed down in ancient texts. While local Bedouins always knew of its existence, to the wider world, Petra had vanished. Petra remained largely forgotten until the early 1800s, when Swiss traveler Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, posing as a Muslim pilgrim, persuaded local guides to escort him to the site. What he discovered astounded him: tombs, temples, and palaces swallowed by sand and time. Use of Petra slowly reached the outside world, and over the next 200 years, it re-emerged in global imagination. Yet, the Nabateans still elude full understanding. They left few detailed accounts. Their cities are known, yet their full function is still debated. Their gods are named, but not deeply described. Their rise was gentle, their fall quieter still, and yet their presence persists. Water channels remain etched into the rock. Temple facades still blush red in the light of sunset. The trade routes they once commanded continue to echo through history. Walking through Petra today feels like stepping into a parallel age. The breeze hums through the sick, sand pools in the corners of sculpted steps. Faint carvings hover just above eye level, still readable if you know what to seek. Petra breathes a different rhythm. It reminds us that once, here in this remote corner of the world, people lived, traded, prayed, and endured. What makes the Nabateans so mesmerizing isn't just what they constructed, but how they lasted. Their power wasn't shouted from mountaintops, it was understood through terrain, water, and culture. They didn't demand attention, they simply existed where the world had to pass, and they listened. Perhaps that is their greatest legacy. In a desert of shifting sands and forgotten voices, the Nabateans carved something lasting. They knew that stone could outlive empires, that silence could still speak, and that even in the most barren places, civilization could bloom quietly, gracefully, and with an enduring soul. Far from the ancient highlands of Anatolia, in another corner of the world and many centuries later, a new power emerged, rooted deep in the lush, rain-drenched heart of Southeast Asia, within the tropical forests of present-day Cambodia, bordered by rivers and fertile plains. The Khmer Empire rose as a dominant and highly advanced force during the medieval era. But unlike many ancient cultures lost to legend and rubble, the Khmer left behind an enduring mark, temples of stone nestled in the jungle, watching the centuries pass in silent testimony. The story of this mighty civilization begins in the 9th century CE, in the verdant lands we now know as Cambodia. It was a world governed by rivers and rice cultivation, shaped by monsoon cycles and thick vegetation. Life moved to the rhythm of the rains. Though the soil was rich, managing it demanded innovation, irrigation systems, vast reservoirs, and meticulous engineering. The Khmer not only mastered this challenge, they expanded their control of water to an unprecedented scale in the region. By the early 800s, under the reign of Jayavarman II, the foundation of Khmer greatness was laid. He proclaimed himself a Devaraja, or God King, and established a new seat of power in the Panam Kulon highlands. From this sacred center, the empire began to expand over the next 600 years, eventually encompassing wide swaths of what are now Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. At its zenith, the Khmer ruled one of Southeast Asia's most vast and enduring empires. Today, when we reflect on the Khmer, one image stands out above all: Angkor. But Angkor was not simply a city, it was an immense metropolis of temples, canals, roadways, reservoirs, and government centers, home to hundreds of thousands, possibly even 1 million people. It served as both the political heart and spiritual soul of the empire. These temples were not just religious sanctuaries, they were architectural embodiments of the universe, built like sacred mountains, aligned with celestial movements, and adorned with elaborate carvings. The most iconic of them all, Angkor Wat, was constructed in the 12th century under King Jayavarman II, still the largest religious monument in existence. It was originally dedicated to Vishnu, a major Hindu deity. Its 5 towers symbolize the peaks of Mount Meru, believed in both Hindu and Buddhist traditions to be the cosmic center of all creation. A vast moat, over 600 feet wide, encircles the complex, symbolizing the mythical ocean surrounding the universe. As one walks its long corridors, bas-reliefs tell epic tales of gods and warriors, dancers and demons, etched with exquisite precision. Just to the north lies Angkor Thom, a later royal city established by Jayavarman VII. At its core stands the Bayon Temple, famed for its enigmatic towers adorned with large, smiling stone faces gazing in every direction. These faces, repeated dozens of times across the towers, likely depict either the king himself or a bodhisattva, merging divine presence with royal identity. Surrounding these serene faces are vivid carvings of Khmer daily life, markets buzzing with trade, farmers harvesting rice, fishermen at work, and dancers in graceful motion. It's a rare glimpse into the lives of ordinary people, preserved alongside images of deities and monarchs. Yet Angkor was more than temples. The Khmer engineered a monumental water control network, an intricate web of canals, earthen dikes, and massive reservoirs called barrays, designed to manage the seasonal flow of water throughout the year. This allowed rice farming on a scale unmatched by neighboring kingdoms, even during dry periods. Modern LiDAR scans laser mapping from the air have unveiled the full extent of this hydraulic infrastructure, revealing vast urban and agricultural areas long hidden beneath the jungle. Daily life in the empire thrived beyond the grandeur of stone. Villages dotted the waterways. Farmers toiled in flooded paddies. Traders navigated inland channels. Skilled artisans crafted pottery, sculptures, jewelry, and metalwork. Khmer society was highly hierarchical, with kings, nobles, and priests at the top. Yet it was also complex and orderly. Temple inscriptions reveal details of tax systems, land allocations, and labor assignments. Religious beliefs evolved over time. Initially centered on Hinduism, the empire gradually embraced Mahayana Buddhism, and later Theravada Buddhism, a tradition still deeply embedded in Cambodian life today. These transitions were fluid, with older beliefs often blending into newer spiritual frameworks. So, what led to the empire's decline? Unlike civilizations that vanish abruptly, the Khmer faded over generations. By the 14th and 15th centuries, Angkor's dominance began to wane. Political authority shifted southward toward Phnom Penh and the coastal trade routes. The vast water management systems may have faltered, disrupted by climate shifts, droughts, floods, or silt accumulation. Meanwhile, external threats, particularly from the expanding Siamese kingdom to the west, put increasing pressure on the empire. Eventually, the great cities were left behind, not destroyed, but overtaken by forest. The temples stood, weathered but intact, no longer central to daily life. The idea that Angkor was lost is an exaggeration. Local Khmer communities never abandoned it entirely. Shrines remained active, and Buddhist monks continued to inhabit parts of the complex. But to the outside world, the splendor of Angkor faded from memory. It wasn't until the 19th century that Western explorers and scholars reintroduced Angkor to the global imagination. French naturalist Henry Maud's travel journals captivated European readers, renewing interest in the ancient city. Today, to walk through Angkor is to move through history on foot. The roots of massive trees, strangler figs, and kapok snake around crumbling walls, especially at Ta Prohm, where the jungle and temple seem to have grown as one. Smooth stone floors are worn from countless footsteps. Cicadas hum in the heat. A monk's chant may echo from a shaded alcove. The place hums with memory, not silence. What makes the Khmer Empire especially captivating is not just its scale or artistry, but its persistence. The images carved into Angkor's walls continue to inspire. The myths still resonate. The patterns of water, rice, and rain still shape life for millions. The true wonder of the Khmer is not that it disappeared, but that so much of it remains. This was a civilization that didn't just build with stone. It designed with meaning. It shaped landscapes, governed with spirituality, and left behind more than monuments. It left behind a worldview, and while its political capital may have quieted, its legacy speaks through the jungle, the rivers, the rituals, and the very language of Cambodia today. The Khmer never truly vanished. They transformed, they survived, and their story continues to rise skyward, carved in stone and rooted in the earth. Far across the globe, from Southeast Asia's lush forests, high in the formidable Andes Mountains of South America, another ancient culture quietly molded the land in ways that would outlast empires. Long before the mighty Inca rose to prominence or Machu Picchu crowned its peaks, a lesser-known civilization laid the structural and cultural groundwork for life in the Peruvian highlands. Though unfamiliar to many outside academic fields, their influence endures etched inroads, terraces, and urban design. This is the tale of the Wari. The Wari thrived in Peru's central highlands between approximately 500 and 1000 CE, nearly half a millennium before the Inca began their expansion. Despite predating them, the Wari helped shape many traditions and systems the Inca would later adopt. They emerged in a region of severe contrasts: high altitude, plateaus, plunging valleys, and shifting microclimates, where survival demanded adaptation and foresight. Their capital, also called Wari, was located near modern-day Ajaccio, perched at a dizzying 2,800 meters, or about 9,200 feet above sea level. From this elevated command post, the Wari established a network of urban centers, trade corridors, and agricultural hubs that spanned vast terrain from Peru's northern coastline to the southern reaches near Bolivia. Unlike civilizations known for colossal statues or towering pyramids, the Wari distinguished themselves through functional ingenuity. Their urban planning was systematic. Their cities, constructed with stone and adobe, featured defined sectors, housing districts, ritual precincts, and civic buildings, all arranged with clarity and purpose. Their engineering prowess extended to water as well. They built canals, reservoirs, and terraces that turned challenging mountainsides into flourishing farmland. Central to Wari life was a sophisticated approach to managing people, space, and resources. Their reach stretched across a tapestry of ecological zones: arid coasts, lush valleys, and humid jungles, each offering unique goods. Through centrally governed production and satellite administrative hubs, they coordinated this diversity with striking efficiency. While not an empire in the strictest sense, their power was undeniably centralized and far-reaching. One of their architectural trademarks was the distinct D-shaped temple, rarely found outside their cultural sphere. These structures often served religious functions, hosting rituals, offerings, and feasts, possibly in honor of ancestors or deities. Burial practices provide additional insight. Elites were often interred beneath their homes or communal plazas, enveloped in layers of fine textiles and accompanied by ceramics, foodstuffs, and treasured items. Textile artistry was of exceptional importance to the Wari. Their weavers crafted elaborate, geometric patterns using brightly colored dyes and exquisitely spun threads. Some designs are so intricate that their full complexity emerges only when the cloth is unraveled. These textiles weren't merely decorative, they were markers of identity, social rank, currency, and possibly even encoded belief systems. Ceramic art offers another glimpse into their worldview. Painted jars and vessels often depicted stylized images of humans, divinities, animals, and warriors, rendered with bold lines and earthy hues. The visual style bridges the aesthetics of both earlier cultures, like the Nazca, and later groups, like the Inca, suggesting a visual and symbolic continuity across the Andes. One of the most stunning archaeological finds tied to the Wari came from El Castillo de Huami, a coastal site in northern Peru. In 2013, researchers uncovered a royal tomb that had remarkably avoided looting. Inside were the remains of noble women, possibly priestesses, buried with a dazzling array of jewelry, fine woven fabrics, gold, silver, and ceremonial vessels. This find strongly implies that elite women may have wielded significant religious and social authority. Though highly advanced, the Wari remained under-recognized. Much of what they built was later integrated into Inca infrastructure, blurring historical distinctions. Segments of the famed Inca road system, or Capac On, may in fact have Wari origins. Many Wari settlements lie beneath modern towns or have slowly succumbed to erosion, making their remnants more scattered than monumental. As to their decline, the exact cause remains uncertain. By around 1000 CE, their centralized system began to unravel. Some researchers cite prolonged droughts or environmental shifts. Others suggest that the challenges of managing such an expansive and ecologically diverse network without modern technology led to their gradual fragmentation. Their cities weren't sacked or razed, they were left behind, overtaken by vegetation, time, and newer civilizations. Yet the Wari legacy did not vanish. Their systems of governance, agriculture, engineering, and even artistic traditions lived on, adopted and adapted by the Inca and others. When the Inca rose to power, they inherited not a blank slate, but a complex framework built by predecessors like the Wari. It was a heritage of structure, long-term vision, and respect for the land's rhythms. Today, visiting ancient Wari sites like Piquelecta near Cusco reveals remnants of their planning: broad streets, sturdy walls, and pathways that disappear into the mist. There are no gilded palaces or towering idols, but there is order, harmony, and a lingering sense of people who knew how to live deliberately in concert with their environment. What makes the Wari remarkable isn't grand spectacle or legendary downfall, but the quiet strength of their achievements. They did not dominate through force or myth. Instead, they shaped their world through careful planning, patience, and ecological wisdom. Their influence still echoes through the Andes, in the stones beneath our feet, in the patterns of farming, and in the soft imprint of a civilization that valued endurance over glory. From the silent heights of the Peruvian highlands, the Wari remind us that sometimes the most powerful legacies are the ones built slowly, with purpose, and meant to last. From the meticulously constructed cities along the Indus Valley, we now journey across vast oceans to the heart of North America. Here, in the river valleys, expansive woodlands, and undulating prairies, a distinct civilization flourished, one that left no stone structures or written records, yet was equally intricate and enigmatic. These people shaped their world with earth, structured their society through ritual, and quietly thrived across the continent. At its zenith, their cities rivaled the population of major European capitals. This is the history of the Mississippian civilization. The Mississippian culture was not an empire or a single dynasty. It was a shared set of cultural practices, architectural traditions, trade networks, and spiritual beliefs that stretched across much of the southeastern and midwestern United States. Emerging around 800 CE, it reached its peak between 1000 and 1350 CE, leaving behind hundreds of mound sites and a cultural influence that still echoes in the land today. What distinguishes the Mississippian culture is not only its wide-reaching presence, but the quiet transformation it brought to a vast region, one achieved without the common tools and materials associated with ancient civilizations. There were no towering stone cities or carved inscriptions. Instead, the Mississippians utilized what they had at hand: soil, wood, and a deep connection to the rhythms of both the earth and the cosmos. The Mississippians' most enduring legacies are the earthen mounds they constructed. These were not mere piles of dirt, but meticulously crafted platforms, built basket by basket, often over generations. Some were simple, while others rivaled the size of monumental pyramids. These mounds supported temples, council houses, residences for elites, and spaces for ceremonial activities. Their design was not only functional but also symbolic, marking sacred spaces and connecting communities to spiritual beliefs. The scale and sheer number of these mounds point to a high level of social organization, coordination, and labor, all achieved without draft animals or wheeled transport. At the heart of this culture was Cahokia, situated just across the Mississippi River from present-day St. Louis. Cahokia stood as the largest and most complex urban center in the region north of Mexico during its time. At its peak around 1100 CE, the city may have hosted a population of over 20,000 people, making it larger than many contemporary European cities. The focal point of Cahokia was Monk's Mound, an awe-inspiring structure that still rises over 10 stories high and spans more than 14 acres. Once crowned with a large wooden building, perhaps a temple or the residence of a high-ranking religious leader, Monk's Mound stood as a testament to the architectural prowess of the Mississippians. Surrounding the mound were grand plazas, rows of thatched dwellings, storage pits, smaller mounds, and ceremonial posts aligned with the movement of the sun. This was no accidental settlement. The city was laid out with geometric precision, integrating solar alignments and spaces for ritual. Archaeologists have uncovered wooden post circles, often referred to as wood henges, which likely functioned as early calendars, tracking the solstices and equinoxes. The layout of the city not only demonstrates technical expertise, but also reflects a cosmological worldview, where the physical arrangement of the city mirrored the heavenly order and the sacred structure of the universe. But Cahokia was merely one part of a much larger network. Across modern-day states such as Illinois, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri, and Oklahoma, other mound-building societies flourished. Places like Etowah, Moundville, Spiro, and Cahokia itself. These cities were interconnected through trade, pilgrimages, and shared cultural practices. Goods moved along rivers and trade routes. Copper from the Great Lakes, marine shells from the Gulf Coast, mica from the Appalachians, and obsidian and clay from the West. In exchange, artisans crafted finely made pottery, effigy pipes, engraved shell gorgets, and ceremonial copper plates, each item rich in meaning and purpose. The imagery of the Mississippians reflected a deeply symbolic worldview, with recurring motifs such as winged figures, sunbursts, serpents, thunderbirds, warriors, and dancing deities. These were not mere decorations. They embodied complex mythologies that archaeologists now identify as part of the southeastern ceremonial complex. The Mississippian worldview likely saw the upper world, the sky and heavens, the middle world, the earth, and the underworld, water and spiritual realms, as interconnected. The mounds and temples acted as bridges connecting these realms. For the average Mississippian, life was centered around agriculture. Corn, beans, squash, and sunflowers were cultivated in the fertile fields surrounding the communities. The people lived in rectangular dwellings constructed from wooden posts, clay, and thatch, often clustered around shared courtyards. Their society was organized into different classes, with elites enjoying better housing, more favorable burial rites, and higher social status. Though most lived simple lives, the coordinated effort required to build the mounds, conduct ceremonies, and manage long-distance trade indicates a society marked by structure and stability. However, despite their many achievements, the Mississippian centers began to decline by the 14th century. Cahokia, the largest of them, saw its population dwindle, its plazas fall silent, and its mounds gradually left behind. Other centers also fell into decline. By the time European explorers arrived, these great cities had vanished. Only the mounds remained, with the identities of their builders lost to history. The reasons for the Mississippian decline are still debated among researchers. Environmental strain likely played a role. Cahokia, for example, shows evidence of deforestation, overfarming, and soil erosion, suggesting that the city may have pushed its landscape to its limits. Climatic shifts, particularly the Little Ice Age, may have reduced growing seasons and caused floods and droughts, making it difficult to sustain large populations. Social and political tensions could also have contributed. As resources became scarcer, conflicts may have arisen between elites and commoners, or between rival groups within and outside the culture. The once centralized ceremonial centers may have become unstable as authority weakened. Together with food shortages, disease, and migration, the once cohesive Mississippian culture may have slowly fractured. However, the Mississippian people did not simply disappear. Their descendants endured, adapting to changing circumstances. Many contemporary Native American nations, including the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and others, carry elements of Mississippian culture in their oral traditions, social structures, and spiritual practices. The mounds, though no longer used in the same way, continue to stand as symbols of continuity and sacred presence. Today, sites like Cahokia, Mound's State Historic Site, are protected and studied. offering visitors the chance to explore the grounds, climb Monk's Mound, and stand amidst the ruins of a civilization that once dominated the interior of North America. Although silent, the landscape still speaks. It speaks through the layout of the plazas, the tools unearthed from the earth, the deliberate placement of ceremonial objects, and the enduring shape of the mounds themselves. The Mississippian story is compelling not only because of what they built, but because of how they achieved it. Without iron, wheels, or writing, they created a culture of great scale, sophistication, and symbolic depth. Their buildings were made of earth, but their ideas reached high, linking the land with the sky, life with spirit. The Mississippians remind us that civilization can manifest in many forms, and that true power is not always loud. Sometimes it's found in the soil, in silence, and in the steady rhythm of people working together. Their legacy still lingers in the land, in the meandering rivers, and in the curves of the mounds. Though their names may be forgotten, their vision remains carved into the ground and passed down through the stories of the people they once were. In a realm of mist and treasure, a culture once thrived in the highlands of present-day Colombia. This was the world of the Muisca, a people whose society was as rich in meaning as it was in craftsmanship. Although they did not construct towering stone pyramids or build sprawling empires, they developed a complex, refined civilization that quietly flourished in one of the most awe-inspiring landscapes on Earth. The Muisca inhabited the Altiplano Cundiboyacense, a high plateau nestled within the Andes, surrounded by towering mountains and crisscrossed by rivers and lakes. This region includes what is now Bogota, the capital of Colombia, and extends through modern-day departments such as Cundinamarca, Boyacá, and parts of Santander. At altitudes of over 8,000 feet above sea level, the air is crisp, the nights cool, and the land fertile, ideal for cultivating crops. It was here that the Muisca people established one of the most advanced pre-Columbian societies in South America. Outside the sphere of the Inca civilization, the Muisca belonged to the broader Chibchan linguistic family, and their cultural roots extended back centuries before the Spanish arrived in the Americas. By the time Europeans made contact in the 16th century, the Muisca were organized into a confederation of chieftaincies, home to hundreds of thousands of individuals. Their social structure was not that of a conventional empire. There were no central kings or standing armies. Instead, the Muisca were ruled by two principal leaders, the Zepa, who governed the southern region from Bogotá, modern-day Bogotá, and the Zac, who ruled the northern territories from Hunza, present-day Tunja. These two leaders shared authority over a loosely connected federation of villages, towns, and sacred places, all bound together by trade, religious rituals, and a shared cultural identity. Daily life among the Muisca was intrinsically tied to the land. They were skilled farmers, cultivating crops like maize, potatoes, beans, and quinoa. The cool, moist climate of the plateau was well suited to terrace agriculture, and the Muisca used advanced techniques to manage both water and soil. They also mined salt, especially in towns such as Zipaquira and Nimacon, where vast underground salt deposits served as the basis for the region's economy. Salt was more than a commodity. It was used as currency, a valuable trade item, and a symbol of both wealth and spiritual power. In terms of craftsmanship, the Muisca excelled in textiles, ceramics, and, most famously, in goldwork. Though they did not mine vast quantities of gold themselves, they acquired it through trade and skillfully shaped it into intricate objects using lost wax casting and hammering techniques. Their creations included delicate pendants, figurines, breastplates, nose rings, and ritual masks, all adorned with elaborate patterns. Gold, however, was not valued for its monetary worth, but for its spiritual significance, symbolizing the sun, purity, and the divine. The most enduring legend of the Muisca is that of El Dorado, the Golden One. According to early Spanish chroniclers, the Zepa would participate in a sacred ritual at Lake Guatavita, a small, circular lake nestled high in the Andes. covered in gold dust. The ruler would embark on a raft with priests and attendants, casting offerings of gold and emeralds into the waters as a tribute to the gods. The lake was seen as sacred, a place where the living could communicate with their ancestors and nature spirits. Whether or not this ritual occurred exactly as described, Lake Guatavita undoubtedly held profound meaning, and the legend of the Golden Man fueled centuries of European obsession and myth. The Muisca viewed the world through a spiritual lens that embraced dualities, light and darkness, sun and moon, male and female. Their gods embodied these forces. The sun god, and Kialetas, the moon goddess, were among the most revered deities. Sacred locations, temples, and calendar systems were aligned with celestial movements, and many of their rituals were performed in nature, near lakes, caves, and mountaintops. They had priests and shamans, and their myths were passed down orally from one generation to the next. One of the most intriguing features of Muisca culture was their calendar system. This lunar solar calendar governed agricultural cycles, trade, and religious practices, and it was believed to include complex cycles and ceremonial dates. Though much of it remains undeciphered, the existence of such a system indicates the Muisca's deep understanding of time, seasons, and cosmology, and suggests a society that valued the rhythms of the earth, sky, and community. The Muisca traded not only with other Chibchan-speaking peoples, but also with the wider Andean world. They exchanged goods such as salt, emeralds, cotton, and ceramics with neighboring groups. Though they had no written language, their legacy survives in the archaeological record. Tools, jewelry, sacred sites, and burial mounds, known as guacas, which were often constructed for the elite and filled with offerings. The arrival of the Spanish in the early 1500s brought disruption to the Muisca that they had never experienced before. When Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada entered their territory in 1537, the Muisca did not respond with open warfare, but with confusion, negotiation, and, eventually, resistance. The Muisca had no standing army, no history of imperial conquest, and no centralized authority strong enough to mount a united defense. Both the Zepa and the Zac were captured and replaced with puppet leaders, and within a generation, Spanish control over the region was secured. Yet, conquest alone was not the full story. Disease, particularly smallpox, swept through Muisca communities, decimating the population. Entire villages were abandoned, and priests, elders, and oral historians perished, taking with them the unwritten stories of the past. The Spanish imposed new laws, religion, and economic systems, draining sacred lakes in search of treasure and destroying temples. The Muisca way of life, deeply rooted in ritual, reciprocity, and a spiritual connection to the land, was dismantled piece by piece. Despite this, the Muisca were not entirely lost. Many of their descendants continue to live in Colombia today, and in recent years, there has been a quiet revival of Muisca identity. Indigenous leaders, historians, and communities have worked to reclaim their language, rituals, and ancestral knowledge. Though the continuity of their civilization was interrupted, their memory endures and their stories persist. Lake Guatavita still glimmers with myth, and gold figures unearthed from Muisca tombs continue to shine in museums, standing as silent witnesses to a culture that moved with grace through time. The Muisca remind us that not all civilizations are defined by grand monuments or written records. Some leave behind subtle traces, patterns in clay, echoes in water, threads of belief stretching from the soil to the stars. The Muisca did not vanish in a single moment. Instead, they were absorbed, overwritten, and fragmented. But even now, when the light strikes the mountains of Cundinamarca just so, or the mist rises over Lake Tota, it's easy to imagine a world that once moved to a different rhythm, a world shaped not by conquest, but by ceremony, not by empire, but by meaning. And perhaps that is why the Muisca endure. They teach us that legacy is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet. It resides in the land, waits in the stories, and lingers gently, waiting for those who are ready to listen. Nestled between the vast expanse of sea and sky, the island of Crete emerges as a jewel in the Mediterranean. Before the rise of classical Greece, before the majestic temples of Athens or the legendary warriors of Sparta, there existed a civilization that would lay the foundations for Europe's earliest cultural brilliance. This was the Minoan world, refined, artistic, and serene, a society whose achievements were nothing short of remarkable. The Minoan civilization began around 3000 BCE and thrived for over a millennium, reaching its zenith between 2000 and 1450 BCE, located primarily on Crete, with influence extending to nearby islands like Thera. Modern-day Santorini. The Minoans built a society deeply intertwined with the sea. What sets them apart isn't merely their ancient origins, but the manner in which they lived peacefully, elegantly, and without the typical militaristic ambitions of their time. Unlike many contemporary cultures, the Minoans constructed cities without protective walls. Their art wasn't dominated by themes of war, and their homes were airy, with temples that shimmered in vibrant hues. Their existence seemed centered not on conquest, but on the rhythm of daily life, rituals, and the ebb and flow of nature. Crete, though isolated, was perfectly positioned for trade. Surrounded by the sea, it connected with Egypt, Anatolia, and the Levant. The Minoans became masters of the seas, skilled sailors and navigators. Their economy revolved around trade. They exchanged wine, olive oil, pottery, saffron, and tin, and in return, they shared their unique art, architecture, and aesthetic, leaving a lasting imprint across the Mediterranean world. Minoan society appeared to be relatively egalitarian compared to other ancient cultures. Artifacts often depict women in influential roles, suggesting they were integral to religious practices and ceremonial life. There is little evidence of kings or standing armies, nor are there large-scale fortifications. This absence of militarism suggests that the Minoans were more focused on community, seasonal rites, and shared prosperity than on domination. The land itself was rich, with fertile plains and terraced hillsides, ideal for cultivating olives, grapes, barley, and legumes. Beehives provided honey, while sheep and goats offered wool, meat, and milk. Fishing complemented their diet, and the ever-present sea was both a means of survival and a backdrop to their rituals. Minoan villages were connected by paths and ports, forming a network of trade that supported both economic and cultural stability for centuries. Minoan urban design reflected a preference for openness and light. Homes were often multi-storied, with inner courtyards and early plumbing systems for water and waste. Walls were painted, floors tiled, and columns carved with meticulous care. These were not rudimentary shelters, but thoughtfully designed living spaces that balanced form and function. At the heart of Minoan society stood the palace, vast, sprawling complexes that served multiple purposes: administrative, religious, and social. The most famous of these was Knossos, located near modern Heraklion, but other sites, such as Phaistos, Malea, and Zakros, also show the reach of Minoan influence across Crete. These palaces were not fortresses. They had no massive walls or defensive towers. Instead, their layout was open, organic, and almost playful, with winding corridors, expansive courtyards, ceremonial halls, storerooms, staircases, and residential quarters. At Knossos, multi-story buildings featured light wells and open-air galleries, with columns that tapered downward, a design unique to Minoan architecture. Their plumbing systems provided water throughout the complex, with some buildings equipped with toilets and bathtubs, reflecting a civilization that understood both technology and comfort. Then there were the frescoes, paintings unlike anything seen in the ancient world. The Minoan murals, found in palaces and homes, are full of life, elegance, and motion. They depict scenes from nature: leaping dolphins, blooming lilies, flocks of birds, as well as people dancing, gathering, and performing rituals. Some of the most iconic frescoes depict bull leaping, where acrobats grasped the horns of a charging bull. Whether as a sport, a ceremony, or a myth, the bull held central significance in Minoan culture. Men and women alike are shown with poised postures, stylized hair, and graceful clothing, embodying a society that celebrated life's beauty in both form and movement. Minoan society appears to have been relatively egalitarian, especially when compared to other ancient cultures. Women seem to have held positions of religious or ceremonial authority. Art focused not on kings or warfare, but on capturing moments of life, rituals, and nature's inherent beauty. The Minoans also had a written script, Linear A, though it remains undeciphered, found on tablets, pottery, and religious offerings. It predates the later Greek Linear B script used by the Mycenaeans. Without a key to translation, we are left to wonder what stories, laws, or prayers these symbols might have conveyed. Despite the lack of written records, we know that the Minoans had a bureaucracy. They managed trade, tracked goods, and kept records, but much of their belief system remains a mystery. What we do know is that Minoan religion centered on nature, fertility, and goddess worship. Temples were built on mountain peaks and in caves, sacred spaces that endured long before and long after the Minoan era. They made offerings of clay figurines, bullhorns, and double axes. The labares, a symmetrical double-headed axe, became a symbol of power and ritual, possibly associated with priestesses or divine authority. The horns of consecration, another recurring symbol, mimicked the shape of bullhorns and adorned buildings and altars. Despite their advancements, the Minoans never formed an empire. There is no evidence of military expansion or conquest. Their influence spread through trade and culture, not by force. Their art reached Egypt, their pottery traveled to Cyprus, and their ships sailed the eastern Mediterranean. For centuries, they maintained a golden age of interconnectedness and creativity. But that balance was not destined to last forever. Around 1600 BCE, disaster struck. A volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera sent ash, debris, and possibly tsunamis across the Aegean. This eruption, one of the largest in recorded history, may have disrupted Minoan trade, agriculture, and society. Ashfall could have destroyed crops. Earthquakes weakened palaces, and tsunamis may have wiped out coastal towns. Despite these calamities, the Minoans rebuilt their palaces, some even grander than before, though the scars of the event remained. By 1450 BCE, most of the major palaces had been destroyed. The cause remains uncertain, whether by fire, earthquake, or invasion, but in their place came something new. The Mycenaeans, a rising power from mainland Greece, began to dominate. They adopted the Linear B script, which we can read, and their presence is evident in the artifacts, warrior graves, and new pottery styles that replaced Minoan symbols. Whether this was a violent conquest or a gradual assimilation is unclear, but by the 14th century BCE, the Minoan civilization had faded into history. Naxos, once a symbol of artistic and architectural brilliance, became a Mycenaean outpost. Although the Minoans were absorbed into the growing Greek identity, traces of their culture linger. The myth of King Minos, the labyrinth, and the Minotaur may echo the Minoan religion and architectural style. The labyrinthine palace at Naxos may have inspired Greek myths, becoming both a literal and symbolic representation of something wild and sacred. Centuries later, when Greek poets and philosophers contemplated civilization, the Minoans had already slipped into legend. It wasn't until the early 20th century, when Sir Arthur Evans began excavating Naxos, that their story resurfaced. Evans named the civilization after King Minos, and though this name is modern, it gave voice to a civilization long buried beneath the earth. Today, as you walk through the ruins of Naxos, the Minoan presence is palpable. Sunlight filters through open courtyards, painted columns tilt gently toward the sky, and dolphins glide across plastered walls. Though the voices of the Minoans are silent, their essence remains. They did not build an empire, nor did they seek military glory, but they created cities that resonated with rhythm and life. They painted stories in color and movement, and they remind us that peace, too, can leave behind a legacy, a story that flows like the waves of the sea, returning in echoes throughout time. Journey through history to the Horn of Africa, where an extraordinary civilization once rose in peaceful strength. In the highlands of modern-day northern Ethiopia and parts of Eritrea, the Kingdom of Aksum flourished as one of the most powerful and mysterious cultures in early African history. Unlike others, Aksum didn't leave behind legends of sudden collapse or lost cities swallowed by the jungle. Instead, it left stone obelisks, ancient coins, and whispers of far-reaching connections, continuing to intrigue the world centuries after its decline. The origins of Aksum trace back to around the 1st century CE, although its roots may extend even further, entwined with earlier local cultures such as the DMT Kingdom. Strategically situated near the Red Sea, the Aksumites were positioned as a bridge between Africa, the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. They constructed their cities in the Ethiopian highlands, surrounded by fertile lands, rivers, and rugged mountains that provided both abundance and natural defense. What truly distinguished Aksum was its profound engagement with the world beyond its borders. While it was rooted in African traditions, it rapidly became an influential player in global trade. At its zenith, Aksum conducted trade with the Roman Empire, Persia, India, and even China. The ports, particularly Agilis, became bustling trade hubs where goods such as ivory, gold, salt, spices, glassware, silk, and more were exchanged. Roman coins were discovered in Aksumite graves, and Indian textiles found their way to the kingdom's inland markets. Aksum was not isolated, but cosmopolitan, connected, and confident in its place among the world's great civilizations. The cities of Aksum reflected their prosperity and refinement. While most of Aksum's structures were built from mud, brick, and wood, its stonework left an enduring mark, especially the towering stelae or obelisks. These monumental stone pillars, some over 20 meters tall, were carved from single blocks of granite to commemorate royal tombs or sacred sites. They weren't just feats of engineering, they symbolized state power, spiritual authority, and cultural pride. Even in ruins, these obelisks exude a quiet, lasting sense of permanence. Aksumite society was highly organized, with a complex structure. At its apex was the king, known as the Negus, or King of Kings. Beneath him were local rulers, administrators, priests, and artisans. Evidence of an organized bureaucracy, skilled craftsmanship, and large-scale construction is abundant. The kingdom's economy relied heavily on agriculture, cultivating crops like sorghum, barley, wheat, and teff, grown on terraced hillsides. Cattle and goats were raised for meat, milk, and wool, while fishing provided additional sustenance. The people of Aksum were not only builders and farmers, but also sailors, scholars, traders, and diplomats. One of the most distinct markers of Aksum's sophistication was its coinage. Beginning in the 3rd century, Aksum began minting its own coins, initially in bronze and silver, and later in gold. These coins, bearing the faces of kings, inscriptions in Ge'ez, the local script, and Christian symbols after the kingdom's conversion, were not only used in international trade, but also served as a declaration of sovereignty. Aksum was one of the first African kingdoms to issue such refined and consistent coinage. Temples dedicated to local deities were constructed, and some of the stelae may have served both religious and commemorative purposes. However, in the 4th century, a pivotal transformation occurred. Aksum officially embraced Christianity, becoming one of the earliest states to do so. According to tradition, King Ozana converted to Christianity after being influenced by Frumentius, a Syrian Christian who had been brought to Aksum as a captive. Frumentius became the kingdom's first bishop, and under his guidance, Christianity became not just a fringe belief, but a cornerstone of Aksumite identity. Crosses began to appear on coins, and churches were constructed, ushering in a new era that blended faith, politics, and culture in a uniquely African expression of Christianity that still thrives in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Despite its impressive achievements, Aksum was not a military empire in the conventional sense. While it briefly expanded into southern Arabia and controlled parts of Yemen, the kingdom rarely pursued aggressive conquest. Instead, it relied on diplomacy, trade, and religious influence to maintain its power and prestige. This more peaceful form of power helped Aksum to be recognized as one of the four great civilizations of its time, alongside Rome, Persia, and China, as noted by the 4th century Roman scholar Rufinus. However, by the 7th century, Aksum began facing significant challenges. The rise of Islam on the Arabian Peninsula, which led to Islamic powers controlling much of the Red Sea, cut off Aksum's vital trade routes. The once thriving port of Agelis saw a decline, and with it, the flow of goods and wealth that had sustained Aksum's dominance. Internally, Aksum also grappled with environmental pressures, such as soil degradation, deforestation, and climate changes, which made agriculture increasingly difficult to maintain. As external trade waned and the land became less productive, Aksum's urban centers likely shrank, and populations moved inland to the highlands, where new centers of power gradually emerged. Aksum did not fall dramatically or suddenly. There was no invading army or catastrophic event marking its end. Instead, the kingdom slowly faded from the historical stage. By the 10th century, its cities had quieted, and its name had largely disappeared from global affairs. Yet, Aksum's cultural legacy endured. Its descendants continued to live in the highlands, adapting to the changing political landscape. The Christian faith that Aksum had embraced became a defining feature of Ethiopian identity, and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, with its distinct rituals, scriptures, and architecture, traces its origins directly to Aksum. Many Ethiopian emperors claimed descent from King Ozana, and some even traced their lineage back to the legendary union of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, blending history and myth into a powerful national narrative that lasted for centuries. In this way, Aksum was never truly lost. It transformed. Its name was replaced by others, and its power waned, but its spirit persisted. The stone obelisks still stand in modern-day Aksum, silent witnesses to a glorious past. Churches carved from solid rock, scriptures written in GS, and festivals held in the Ethiopian highlands all echo a time when Aksum was a beacon, looking outward across seas and empires. Today, Aksum's ruins remain a source of national pride for Ethiopia and a quiet enigma. We may know much about the kingdom, but still, many questions linger. How did they move such massive stones? How did their inland capital maintain such long-lasting global trade connections? How did a civilization so advanced fade so quietly? The story of Aksum does not need embellishment. Its wonder lies in its quiet balance. It grew through connections, survived through adaptation, and faded gracefully. Perhaps that's why its legacy still feels alive, not as a relic frozen in time, but as a thread woven into the lives, beliefs, and landscapes of those who live there today. From the highlands of ancient Ethiopia, we now turn towards the Mediterranean. From the sweeping grasslands of the Eurasian steppes, where nomadic horsemen once rode freely, we shift focus to the rugged heart of the Mediterranean. Here, on the island of Sardinia, surrounded by salt and stone, lies an enigma of a different nature, one defined less by conquest and movement, and more by enduring silence and permanence. This is the world of the Nuragic civilization, tower builders and seafarers, a people whose legacy is etched into rock. yet whose story remains remarkably elusive. The Nuragic civilization thrived on Sardinia for more than 1,000 years, from approximately 1800 BCE to the Roman conquest in 238 BCE. Its name derives from the iconic structures that symbolize it. The Nuragic, circular stone towers that stand alone or form massive complexes across the island. Today, over 7,000 of these towers remain, with possibly even more buried beneath the earth and forests. Some of these structures are simple watchtowers, while others are grand fortresses featuring central courtyards, spiral staircases, and thick defensive walls. The sheer scale of these constructions, spread throughout Sardinia, makes the island one of the most archaeologically rich regions of prehistoric Europe. These structures were no haphazard creations. Nuragi were built from heavy basalt stones, arranged without mortar, yet with exceptional precision. Some towers rise more than 60 feet tall, requiring coordinated labor, architectural knowledge, and long-term planning. Their exact purpose remains a subject of debate. Were they military fortifications, homes for chieftains, religious centers, or perhaps symbols of power? The consistency in their design and widespread distribution suggests a society that was highly organized, with shared architectural traditions and cultural values. However, the Nuragic people were more than just tower builders. Surrounding these structures, villages grew, consisting of circular stone huts with thatched roofs, clustered together. Some settlements included communal meeting houses, water storage systems, workshops, and evidence of both animal husbandry and crop cultivation. One prime example is the site of Su Nuraxi in Burumani, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Here, a central tower is surrounded by 4 smaller towers connected by curtain walls, encircling a large village, demonstrating the integration of defense, domestic life, and communal infrastructure. The Nuragic people were farmers and animal herders. They grew barley, wheat, and legumes, while raising sheep, goats, pigs, and cattle. Their skills in metalworking were particularly advanced, as they mined and forged bronze tools, weapons, and decorative items, often casting them with intricate designs. Bronze figurines, many depicting warriors, animals, or chariots, have been found in religious contexts, suggesting a belief system connected to the natural world and possibly ancestor worship. Water held significant importance in Nuragic society. The island is home to many sacred wells and subterranean sanctuaries, often exquisitely constructed with stone staircases and corbelled domes. These well temples were likely ritual sites aligned with celestial events. At Santa Cristina, the stairway leading down into the well is so precisely built that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, the sunlight or moonlight illuminates the water in perfect alignment. This blending of astronomy, architecture, and symbolism reveals a spiritual worldview rooted in both nature and the cosmos. Despite their complex culture, the Nuragic people left no written records. What we know of them comes solely from archaeological evidence, pottery, tools, burial practices, and the monumental stone structures that still shape Sardinia's landscape. Their language remains a mystery, and their interactions with neighboring Mediterranean cultures are still speculative, though there are tantalizing clues. Artifacts from the Aegean and Levant, including jewelry, ceramics, and metals, suggest trade or cultural exchange with the Minoans and later the Phoenicians. Bronze statues depicting warriors with horned helmets and shields resemble figures in other Mediterranean cultures, raising questions about shared iconography or common myths. The decline of the Nuragic civilization wasn't marked by a dramatic collapse, but rather a gradual evolution and fading, particularly as external forces, especially from Carthage and Rome, began to reshape Sardinia. By the 6th century BCE, Phoenician settlements appeared along the coasts, and by the 3rd century BCE, Rome began asserting control. The Nuragic world, already in flux, was slowly absorbed into the broader Mediterranean framework. New architectural styles emerged, and old sacred sites were repurposed. The language, customs, and identity of the Nuragic people began to blend with the evolving Mediterranean civilizations. Nevertheless, even as their political independence waned, the Nuragic legacy remained firmly rooted in the landscape. The towers they constructed, whether for defense, worship, or gathering, continued to dominate the terrain. In later centuries, locals believed these towers to be the work of giants. Some were incorporated into medieval churches, while others were left to weather the elements, becoming not just ruins, but enduring presences that never truly vanished. What makes the Nuragic civilization so compelling today isn't only the mystery of their architecture or their quiet disappearance. It's the way they lived, deeply intertwined with the land, the sky, and the sea. They built with purpose, honored the elements, and did so in silence, without empires, conquests, or kings immortalized in stone. To walk among the Nuragi is to enter a world that doesn't fully explain itself, a world of thresholds and towers, of wells that catch the moon, and symbols we have yet to decode. Their silence is not emptiness, but presence. Though we may never fully understand the Nuragic civilization, we can still feel its impact in the stones that rise from the hills, in the quiet symmetry of their villages, and in the knowledge that long before our written histories began, others lived, built, gazed at the stars, and shaped the world in ways we are only beginning to recall. From the stone towers of Sardinia, we now turn our attention to the next chapter in history.